All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here on our 2025 preview and prediction for the Virginia Tech Hokies. Look at this coaching staff, Brent Pry, 16-21, modest record through 3 years. He's going to go ahead and dip into the coaching cycles to add first-year coordinators of Philip Montgomery, Sam Sifkis as offensive and defensive coordinators after a poor 6-7 campaign that did result in the postseason appearance, losing in the Mayo Bowl, but a lot of people, including myself, had them picked to compete for this conference and win 9 to 10 games, top 50 offseason when it comes to recruiting as well. Get things started with the offense. I thought this would be a great group last year, Nick, and turns out they were just a pretty sluggish group overall. Now they're only going to return 2 starters. And I think a big thing here is Kyron Drones. We really expected this guy to ascend into one of the better dual threats in the country, and he's not really probably going to reach those levels. I think he's an accurate quarterback. He's definitely hard to tackle while running due to the skills and his toughness as he absorbs contact very well. But in terms of, diagnosing deep coverages and, not being as reliant on play action, he doesn't really stand out in many regards as a quarterback. And I still think, when you're a dual threat guy, you can be productive, right? But we just didn't see it from Drones last year, and I don't anticipate seeing again. We've seen this plenty of times in college football. You have dual threat guys who produce for 1 year, and then the rest of their career, they don't improve at all in any area. And I think that's the case with Drones, unfortunately, Nick. I think he's going to have another average season. Don't think he's going to be all that great. I definitely think he's still a very impressive runner. And if we can really tailor this offense around his legs, then we can be successful. But I just don't think he's going to grow or progress in any area, any regards at all.
People were really happy with what they saw out of Drones in 2023. And you can't blame them, right? 2,000 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, 3 picks, also had 800 yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns, about 5 yards per carry. Those are all really impressive numbers, but he regressed in every single category last year. I think that's really concerning if you're a Virginia Tech fan. The only thing that really improved for him this past season was a 2% increase in completion percentage, but outside of that, which was still a pretty low number compared to the rest of the conference, overall, you didn't really see enough out of Drones. 1,500 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, 6 picks, all worse numbers than he had the year prior. Only had 98 rushing attempts compared to 166, and had a way less, average, had 3.4 yards per attempt, 6 scores, is slightly better in terms of rushing touchdowns, so that was a nice improvement, but 336 yards was not good either. He just regressed. It just didn't seem comfortable last year, seemed like he had some issues with the O-line, just didn't seem like himself last year. I just don't think he's going to get back that 2023 level. I think, unfortunately, what we saw last year is kind of more what's likely for him this year, and that's just not going to really elevate this offense and get them in a level to compete at a high level in this conference.
I definitely think this run game is going to be a big focal point for the offense because the running back room is phenomenal. Tyrion Stewart had plenty of offers out of the portal. He was an exceptional runner for Bowling Green in his career. 220-pounder, can be a workhorse. He's really good in short yardage. Been very efficient in his career. 23 touchdowns through 4 seasons. He also went to Coastal Carolina to get Braden Bennett. He's coming off 2 good years for the Chanticleers. He's a good dual threat back. He's a 215-pounder. Had 13 touchdowns last season alone. Jeremiah Coney, as a redshirt sophomore, had nearly 100 yards versus the Qs last year. That's pretty much it, though, in limited reps. Pretty good running back room here. Their running backs have good size. Drones themselves, 230. They can have a physical crushing unit, Nick, and I'd certainly love to see this offense be, towards the top of not just the conference, but the entire nation in terms of rushing yards or rushing attempts, that is, per game.
If you're looking for a positive from this offense last year, it was running the ball. 43rd in the nation, 178 yards per game on the ground. If they want to have success, I do agree. I think they have to find it through running the ball. And that's the best way for this offense to be successful this upcoming season. Is just run the ball. Run the ball. They have a lot of talent. Certainly they can do that with their quarterback. I like what they bring in Stewart from Bowling Green. 900 yards rushing for him last year, 5.4 yards per attempt, 6 scores. He was really good for them. He had 8 scores in 2023 as well. He was a really good add out of the portal. I think you can do a lot with him. Bennett from Coastal Carolina, 781, 5.8 yards per attempt, 11 scores last year, 5 in 2023 as well. He had 2 receiving touchdowns last year. He's a phenomenal add. I like some of the depth they have as well. I think Conley is a really solid asset, 179, 5.6 yards per attempt on his limited touches. He's a good player. I like what they have here. They can run the ball very effectively here. I think the O-line will be pretty solid, blocking for them as well. A great running back group here that should really be the focal point of this offense.
Now look at the wide receiver group. Aiden Green had 115 yards in the bowl game. He's the only returnee that did anything notable outside of Tendon. Benji Gosnell, who had 30-plus receptions and was reliable often. Donovan Green, I think, is a good add from Wake Forest. Wasn't as good last year, but does have 1,800 career yards and 13 touchdowns. You picked up Cameron Seldon. This guy was a running back for Tennessee. He's now going to come over to VT in transition to a pass catcher. Isaiah Spencer comes over from Jackson State. posting 600 plus yards last season. Another reason why we should just focus on running the football is this group is abysmal, Nick. This is not good. One of your top guys is a former running back who's going to go play receiver now. This wide receiver group, even in the past, though, was pretty talented. Guys like, Jalen Lane and Ollie Jennings, who were phenomenal portal ads in the past, even had DeQuan Felton in there last year. And we still could not, generate a consistent passing attack that was impressive. So I don't think anything's going to get any better this passing attack. It's going to be awful. The wide receiver group is no good. So let's just pound the rock.
Yeah, I think they gotta run the ball here. I think their best asset in terms of pass catcher is probably their tight end Gosnell, who had 341 yards receiving last year and 2 scores. I think Green was not bad for this team, 268, 14.1, and 2 scores. But overall, man, this is just a weak passing attack. I think the depth is concerning. They bring in Donovan Green from Wake Forest, 380 for him and 3 scores, 16.5 yards to grab. They're hoping he can be solid here, but I have not seen enough. Cameron Seldon, who was a former running back, he had 118 yards and 1 touchdown last year on the ground. That is, wonder what he can do as a receiver. He has really not many catches at all, so kind of weird they're converting him. Isaiah Spencer from Jackson State, that's certainly a gamble from the lower tier. Tucker Holloway, Kalen Adams are players, younger players who don't have a whole lot of reps further down the depth chart. Overall, this is a weak unit, just one of the weakest ones in the conference, if not the weakest passing group in the conference. Just a bad unit overall. I think you got to run the ball a lot here. I like what they have in terms of that regard. So I just don't expect this team to be very efficient through the air. They weren't very efficient through the air last year, below 200 yards per game, 107th in the nation. Probably a similar output from this unit this year.
Now you look at the offensive line. Johnny Garrett's going to slot in at left tackle. Saw 100 plus snaps at both tackle spots last season. He did struggle a good bit in pass blocking, though. Latham Grom, who will move into the starting left guard spot, quite weak as a run blocker. Did bring in 2 transfers to battle for each spot, though. Jaden Muskrat was a starter for Tulsa back in 2022. He's being below average that season. He's been pretty quiet since then. Lucas Austin, a redshirt freshman from West Virginia, is going to compete at left guard. Likely will not get the nod, though, as Thomas Remack was an elite left guard himself for West Virginia. Center's going to see 3 redshirt freshmen contend for that spot. Kyle Altuner also comes over from WVU, and Tommy Richard. He'll be top competitors for that right guard spot likely. Brody Meadows will be a solid addition to the lineup. Saw 300 plus snaps last year as a backup and was quite solid. I think he'll probably be the guy who gets that starting spot, though, at right guard potentially, alongside Montavious Cunningham, who should start at right tackle. Only saw a few snaps last year, but was a really impressive starter back in 2023. I really don't think the offensive line's all that bad. I think the right side will be quality, and I think Remack left guard's a great upgrade, but finding consistency among this group could be an issue. Last year, you had a lot of veterans on this group, really over the last 2 years, and the offensive line hasn't really ascended by any means or overachieved. I think they can be quality this year, Nick, so I'm not going to bash them too much when it comes to the offensive line.
Line's not bad either. I agree with you here. Right, they can become quality throughout this season. I like what they have. Some of the pieces, I think they added some interesting pieces from the portal. I think Meadows will be really solid at right guard. He should end up being a really good player coming into this season. I think Cunningham could be good at right tackle as well. The O line is not really super concerned for me. I don't think they're going to be a phenomenal unit overall. I think they'll be better than they were last year. Nothing too crazy, a middle of the pack unit in the ACC for me.
They look at the offensive verdict for Virginia Tech. They were vastly poor compared to preseason expectations last year, and I really don't see that changing. I don't think Jones is going to develop at all. I think the run game can be dangerous, though, with great portal of dads at running back and Jones with his legs under center. Wide receiver group is poor, though. The offensive line has some glaring holes. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a B minus, and they earned this grade, Nick, of how poor they played last year, so I don't think there's much really to discuss on that one.
Yeah, I think this is an offense that struggled across the board, and I really just don't think they were able to get to the heights that we were kind of hoping for them last year. They had some decent moments, but overall, they just can't really throw the ball effectively, and the passing attack should still be a liability for this team this year. The running back room is good. I like what they have there, so certainly if you want success for Brent Pry's offense, it's got to be on the ground and through the trenches here. I do think the O-line's not a bad unit. Quarterback play, I think, still weak for this conference, and overall, I just don't think this is a great offense.
Now we move to the defensive side of the ball. This was a good group last year, even in some higher scoring affairs. They still played competitive ball, and they're a big reason why Virginia Tech had a shot to win any games to begin with. They do return only 2 starters, but they hit the portal hard, adding 17 guys. Ben Bell arrives from Texas State on the defensive line. This guy was an elite pass rusher for a couple of seasons, bringing 20 career sacks to the table. James DeJacome from Eastern Michigan was a great add. He was a standout versus the run. Also made waves as a pass rusher as well. Keyshawn Burgos saw 450-plus snaps, but was average throughout the season. Asen Stevens wasn't any better at 100-plus reps. I think the interior defensive line, with the return of Kevin Gilliam, saw 400-plus snaps as a 295-pounder is a good start. He was a nice rotational player as a run stopper. Kamari Copeland only played in 4 games early in the season before getting hurt. Emmett Laws only saw a few snaps last year in his freshman campaign. You have a 300-pounder in Emmanuel Hickman. Missed last season, but was a good run defender in the years earlier with schools like USF and ECU. Arias Nash, a bit of an undersized player at 280, but was a strong run defender for Mercer. Cody Huseman was also an elite player versus the run for North Dakota State, but also sits at roughly 283 pounds. Jazari Prestier, Eljad Fall, both saw meaningful reps and were solid at previous destinations. So I don't think this is a bad defensive line. A lot of names I gave you there, Nick, that clearly have some depth. Size maybe not as pronounced. They also brought some guys that can make waves off the edge as a pass rusher. But I definitely think in terms of pass rushing depth, it appears a little weak. And I think the interior size could potentially be a problem for them. It's going to be tough to replace the loss of a guy like Antoine Powell-Ryland, but I think there's enough here to be a stable group.
A lot of bodies here, but I question the size on some of them. I question some of the pass rushing capabilities. This unit was top 40 unit in terms of points per game, 22.8 was a decent number overall last year. I like some of the talent. They bring back Kevin Gillam, who is their biggest guy in terms of returning production, 35 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss and a sack for him. They went to the portal, added some interesting pieces. It starts with Ben Bell. He was decent at times at his previous stops, 13 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 6 QB hurries last year. He had 57 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 10 sacks in 2023, plus 6 QB hurries. So he's a guy that has really high upside if he plays at that level. I think they brought in James Jodcom from Eastern Michigan, who was really good for them last year. Almost 100 tackles on the defensive line, a pretty good number there. 11.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 QB hurries. He's a really good asset to get in this. Emmanuel Hickman, he's been pretty decent at some of his stops. He had 19 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss in 2023. They have a bunch of different names here. They added from the portal that you rattled off, some guys that have some interesting stats. Emmett Laws could be a decent guy that they return as a younger player hoping to get on the field. I do think there's a decent amount of players here that can make this unit strong come the end of the season. They got to be a little bit better against the run. That was their weakest statistic last year, 147 yards per game, 63rd in the nation. Not a bad unit necessarily, but still a unit that needs to improve. I question the pass rush. I question some of the guys coming off the edge. So there's, it's a wait and see approach for these units. There is some upside, but there's also some downside potentially.
Now you look at the linebacking group. The only returning starter on this part of the defense is going to reside at linebacker. Jaden Keller had a team-high 83 tackles, but rarely created a negative play and was below average in most categories. Caleb Woodson, on the other hand, was much stronger versus the run and had better efficiency as a tackler, along with 7 enough TFL and a pick. They picked up Michael Short from UNC, had 100 snaps last season. Caleb Spencer saw 200-plus last year in a versatile role and was actually quite good. Should see more action this season. Also picked up Antoine Santiago, saw 150 snaps last year for Temple. It was pretty good for them. I don't think this is a bad group here. I think the starting duo should be fine. I think they have enough depth to avoid any fall-off in the rotation as well. I'm giving the middle of this defense the biggest strength.
So some good news here is the middle of this defense has your top 2 tacklers. They get back their number 1 and number 2 tackler last year, which Keller was their number 1 tackle, 83 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a pass breakup for him, but he wasn't super spectacular, really. 83 tackles, felt like he was kind of stuffing there at the end of the season by getting some meaningless tackles in the grand scheme of things overall, but Keller, good to get back to top tackler. Caleb Woodson was solid for this team, 72 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick, 2 pass breaks. I thought he was the better of the 2. He should certainly have a good season. I like what he can do. They added Michael Short from North Carolina, 23 total tackles, a tackle for loss last year. Decent rotational depth. Pretty good strength here. I do like what they have in the linebacking core. That's a nice 1-2 punch with Keller and Woodson. Certainly Woodson's the best defensive player on this team.
They move to the secondary for the Hokies. This is a group that's had tremendous talent over the last couple of seasons, but a lot of those guys have transferred out of the program. Thomas Williams didn't really do much in 100-plus snaps last year. Likely to step into a starting cornerback role this fall. Dante Lovett, on the other hand, got around 250 snaps and wasn't all that good, but both new starting CBs were able to get on the field last season. They did pick up Caleb Brown. He was a great starting corner for Hawaii last season. He was strong in all areas. Christian Williams only played in 1 game last fall, is likely going to fill in a backup role on the 2 deep. Isaiah Brown-Murphy was a pretty good starting corner last year for ECU, projected to occupy the slot, but his versatility is going to be highly beneficial for this secondary. You have Christian Ellis, who's also a pretty good versatile starter for New Mexico last year, so they have a few chess pieces I think they can move around. You look at the safety group, Quentin Reddish, who should really break through after being a pretty good player in 300-plus snaps as a freshman, mainly being a standout versus the run. The rest of the group, though, is made up of transfers. Tyson Flowers, he's been elite in coverage the last 2 seasons for Rice. Sherrod Coville played in 400-plus snaps over 3 years at Clemson. Never really did much for the Tigers, though. You have Jordan Bass, who also didn't really see the field in 2 years at Pitt himself. Not a bad group here. I think they have some good players, some good versatility as well in that corner room. should be able to roll out a few different groups and still be sound. So I'm confident in the secondary. I don't know if it's strong enough to give them the nod of the biggest strength, as that belongs to the linebackers, Nick, but this is encouraging.
Yeah, there's a decent secondary here. I think they've added a lot of interesting pieces, and they returned two interesting pieces in Lovett and Williams. Lovett, 20 total tackles, a pick, four pass breakups. He was really good in coverage last year. Thomas Williams, 14 total tackles, and one tackle for loss for him. Not a bad player to get back either. When you look at who they added from the portal, a lot of different names here, a lot of interesting pieces. Tyson Flowers is a guy that I'm very intrigued in from Rice at safety. 38 total tackles, three tackles for loss. Two picks, two pass breakups. He had five of those in 2023. A pretty interesting add. Isaiah Brown Murray coming in from East Carolina, 41 total tackles, a pick, and seven pass breakups last year. He was a pretty good asset for them at corner. Caleb Brown comes in from Hawaii, 24 total tackles, seven pass breakups. He had seven of those in 2023 as well. Pretty good asset. Jordan Bass, 14 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, two QB hurries, and a pass breakup for him. Christian Ellis from New Mexico, he was phenomenal for that team. 99 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, two QB hurries, a pick, four pass breakups. Expect him to be pretty solid, the player out of Jacksonville, Florida. And then Sherrod Covey comes in as well from Clemson. Didn't do a whole lot for them, but high upside potential there as well. He's from in-state Virginia. 12 total tackles, one QB hurry, one pass breakup. A lot of different names here, a lot of different guys that can roll out. I like the portal work they did in the secondary. I think the secondary could be a pretty solid unit. They were average last year, 61st in the nation. I think they can improve certainly here.
Now you look at the verdict for this side of the ball. Hokies fielded a quality group last season, but now they're going to lose most of their top stars, resort to the portal heavily to revamp. I think the defensive line's deep, but lacks compelling size. The linebacker and secondary also showcase some respectable amounts of depth and some playmaking. It should be a good group, but with the pass rush, Powell Ryland might significantly falter. Of course, he's not the only big guy they lost. I thought last year's defense was good for the most part, but a lot of their losses they just weren't all that impressive. They were never getting scorched, though. Even against Miami, they held them to only 508 yards. I know that's a lot, but against the Canes, Nick, that was a great day if you could hold them just to 500, and that gave them a chance to win the game. And a lot of people felt that they came down with the Hail Mary at the end of the day. So every game they lost, they were in because of this defense, even though the scores were a little bit higher. I think this is a very quality group.
Yeah, I like what they have here. I think this is a decent unit overall. I think they have some solid pieces. I like the linebacking core, two really good players there in Keller Woodson, particularly Caleb Woodson. I think he's a really talented player, should be one of the better linebackers in the conference come the end of the season. I like some of the ads on the defensive line. I like a lot of the ads in the secondary. I think some of them are very interesting. I think Brown Murray could be really good at nickel. I think Flowers could be really solid at safety as well. Overall, though, this is a defense that's missing some of those key pieces for me. They're an average unit. I think they'll be middle of the pack in the conference, middle of the pack in the nation, but nothing too crazy. They'll keep them in some games, but they'll also keep them out of some games when push comes to shove. Overall, just a decent unit, nothing too crazy. A B, I think, is a very fair grade.
I move to the schedule and the prediction for Virginia Tech. The Hokies have had respectable results the last 2 years. Problem is there's no momentum in this program. They're expected to win around 10 games last year and compete for the ACC, and they were just flat out awful. They plunged to a below 500 mark. Seems like VT is going to be looking for any excuse to move on from Pry, who has proven to be a poor lead man. Don't think he's a very good head coach, and I think he will be fired come year's end unless he can secure 8+ wins. I don't see that currently on the docket, as the offense will only possess a good run game, while they'll be sluggish in the trenches. And despite having a quality defense, 2025 should be around a carbon copy of last season. Probably will be fired at year's end. They're going to put all their cards on the table to try and get Shane Beamer to come back home, Nick, and coach this program. I think regardless, Pry's got to be gone. The results I've seen over the last couple of years of watching this team have just been incredibly sluggish. I know the end of 2023 they kind of caught fire and were able to, end the season on a high note. But you're still beating some lower tier opponents, and they were able to make a bowl game. And this team's just not been good. Doesn't seem very competitive. I know last year they weren't the worst of losses, but they significantly underachieved. And I think the vision for this program right now is clearly lacking.
Yeah, I think the vision is certainly lacking. I think 4-8 is kind of where this team's at right now. I just don't really see them being a contender at all in this conference. They just lack the depth and talent across the board to make things happen. I made a comment to you before we started recording that I thought it was pretty funny that both Virginia and Virginia Tech hired new coaches at the end of the 2021 season, with Virginia adding Tony Elliott and then Virginia Tech adding Brent Pry, similar to what happened with Ole Miss and Mississippi State when they both hired Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin. Rest in peace, Mike Leach. And that was kind of funny. It's kind of funny to me when the two top programs in the state have to fire their coaches and bring new guys in. And I think that may happen at the end of the season again this year, and both Virginia and Virginia Tech may have to run it back and bring back new coaches after 4 years. I don't know if Brent Pry is the guy long term. It just doesn't seem like he is. I've not seen enough with this team progressing. A 7-6, 6-7 season, I don't think it's good enough. And really, the only reason this team is getting into bowl games because they're beating Virginia, who I was talking about earlier, as the team that has to make a bowl game this year as well. I don't think Brent Pry is getting enough out of this offense. I don't think he's getting enough out of this defense either to save his job. The schedule is pretty tough. There's some tough games in there, but it's also manageable. You get some of your tougher opponents at home, like Louisville and Miami. Those are games in an intimidating environment like Lane Stadium is. You should be competitive in most cases, but I just don't think this team will be this year. They would love to get Beamer in there, obviously, the son of the legendary head coach that was there. I don't know if that's going to happen. It'd be tough to pull a guy away from the SEC to make a move like that to Virginia Tech. I don't know who they could really hire if they fire Brent Pry, but I got to imagine that seat is getting very warm in Blacksburg. This is a program that wants to be competing at the top of the conference and just not been able to do so over the last 10 years or so. And it's certainly disappointing if you're a Hokies fan. This year is going to be a tough season, a very forgettable season in Blacksburg.
Yeah, I think that the schedule is incredibly difficult. 8 wins probably saves the day for you. Maybe even another bowl game. Who knows? But I don't see them being able to get 8. Like you said, some of those favorable home games. Maybe you beat Miami, Virginia, NC State. I think that'd probably be enough to save your job. That's being very, very hopeful. Don't see that happening this year. 4-8, very low season. I think for the Hokies, just throw it in the can, forget about it, and move on to the next guy. It's me for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.